glad I ran into you. It probably, as you knew, it was our 5-year wedding anniversary, and that day was very specifically odd because it was the Trump thing happened that day. So that whole day is like
Well, I
galvanized.
remember we heard the news and we're like, did that really happen? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very strange evening.
Yeah, just a very, very bizarre day. It worked out just fine. I'm glad I ran into you all. So it's
Yeah,
wonderful to have you on the show, Cynthia. Thank you for taking a minute out.
sure, sure. I'm happy to.
So you're very busy here in Kansas City. I caught you down at the Savoy. So before we get into your busy itinerary and your latest album, I want to know 4 years ago, this pandemic really grabbed a hold of the artistic community in a very specific way.
Mm,
How did you live through that time period, and how did it change the way that you approach music and life now?
wow, good question. Well, the happiest thing that happened musically was I'm a member of the Kansas City Euchsters, and one of the and we can several of us can walk to one another's homes.
Yeah.
So there's a sign. I'll see if I can find an image to send you, but they made a really cool little ukulele sign saying 7 minute ukulele concert, 6 p.m. tonight. So that it was outside.
Yep.
It was only, 6 minutes. And people just came from all because they were like, oh my gosh, we can do something. We can get out of the house. We can be entertained. So that was just wonderful and spontaneous. Um, I thought looking back, I thought, wow, I could have memorized like 50 more songs or but I just I'll tell you what I did. The other musical thing I did was I still have a lot of albums and I listened to them alphabetically. I'm like, I'm gonna take out my, uh I can't, my Marilyn Monroe or my, I just listened to my Peggy Lee, my, Grateful Dead, my, just everything. And so I listened to them alphabetically in order. So that was really interesting because it made me think about that time period.
Yeah.
Music is such a potent transporter to, oh my gosh, I was 13 when I listened to this song, and it's just in your DNA. And the other thing that was evoked a lot of memories for me was I finally said I used to be a photographer, and I had boxes. I moved here from New York City, and these boxes were in storage of all my negatives and slides and contact sheets. And I thought, you know what? I always think, I wish I had time to do this. And I'm like, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I have a photo that I took at the top of my stairs looking down of like, it was difficult with the cat, but looking down at all the, piles of slides and things. So I made, I got rid of a lot of stuff, but then I made piles of like family members, friends, different periods of my life that I could then, revisit or send out. And that took months. And that was also evocative of a lot of memories. And there were a lot of music images in there too. So, um, and I guess there was a group of people that I really wasn't part of, but I heard there was a group of people that were musicians that made their living by music.
Hmm.
That is, I wish I could say I did, but I don't. And I know that they all got together and supported one another, and I loved hearing about that
Yeah.
because that's a hard thing.
Yeah, it was a very tough period. So let's get to the beginnings before we get into your latest album, which was in 2019, and what's going on with live shows. I want to kind of peel back the layers and get to the beginning of your career. Where were you born and raised, and how did being a performer and a singer and a model and all of these things, how did that become your life?
Well, I was born outside Philadelphia, and my grandmother was taught stride and jazz piano by the nuns, which was rather risque at the time. So it was said I could sing before I could talk. And if you go back another generation to her mother, I have kind of an interesting, I think it's third cousin once removed, is Taylor Swift, because her great great grandfather, Cece Baldy, was my great grandmother's brother.
Okay.
And so I've been trying to, for years before she was super famous, like contact her. And every time I go into the post office, the guy's like, like they know me. They're like, did you hear from Taylor? And I'm like, no, not yet. So cute. But anyway, and my father sang in a barbershop quartet, and he had such a beautiful voice. I remember I was singing Christmas carols with him one year at Longwood Gardens. It's these beautiful gardens that are outside Philadelphia. And it just brought tears to my eyes. I mean, he was just, his voice was just so beautiful. And so I didn't really have any classical or classic training, but music was always like oh my gosh, my entertainment, my balm, my um, interest. Just, uh, it was so important to me growing up.
Yeah.
And I mean, my grandmother used to dress my sister and I up in hats and canes, and we'd like sing songs. And, it was just, it was fun
Yeah.
and joyful. And to this day, I love sharing that joyfulness and that fun part of it, or even something that's um, touching
Yeah.
uh, to someone.
So who were early influences? Who were you listening to in the jazz world?
So I probably didn't really like start listening and knowing what I was listening to till because in high school I was probably more I listened to a little jazz, but I was probably more rock and roll.
Yeah.
I even had a little Fender Telecaster. And so when I went to college, I fell into this group of friends. Oh my God, they were jazz aficionados. And we would just listen to album after album after album. And when people would come to, town that we could see, we would go see them. And so probably my first um, person I really listened to was like I love Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald. Sorry about the light
Oh,
here.
it's okay.
Um, I love listening to Ben Webster, especially when he got older and he couldn't use his breath the same way, but he modified it and it was so beautiful. So I listened to a lot of horn players. I After college, when I moved to New York, I fell into a group of people that had the most amazing record collection. So I would go over there and listen to really rare singers. Like Claire Austin, Felicia Sanders, Claire Hogan. They had Judy Holliday. They turned me on to all the Marilyn Monroe. Yeah, I couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah.
And um, and and I listened to male vocalists too, as well. But I got to see some of the people. Anita O'Day. Wow, she's so amazing. Um, so I got to see some of the people when I lived in New York, and that was really inspiring because I know that there was one one show where I could make it 2 nights in a row, and I was a starving artist, so I saved up, and it was fascinating because I went to the opening night, and then I went to the second night, and this was with Peggy Lee, and the second night was a little more refined than the first night, but kind of the same thing. And then I saw is it Anita O'Day? I saw twice in a row. Totally different
Yeah.
shows.
Wow.
Just totally different. And So I was already studying the performance of these singers that I admired, and how they might interact with the audience and how they planned their shows. So um, I did a cabaret workshop because I really, really, really wanted to sing, and was terrified of it. And I have a video of it still with Samina, what was her name? Samina De Laurentiis. Anyway, she taught us about staging and patter and putting a show together and the blocking and everything, and then our final thing was a show, and they videotaped it. And I remember watching it afterwards, and I was just smiling and going like this because tears were rolling out of my eyes because I was so terrified. But and I had one number where I was laying on the piano, and people sent me flowers and they put them on the piano. So when I went to get up there, I was like, oh my God, I can't knock this vase over. How am I going to look like I'm very happily lounging and not kick this off the stage? So that was fun. I kind of lost set of track of the question. Sorry.
Well, no, 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 we're good. I wanted to move on. So you went from Philadelphia to New York. So
Mhm.
I'm just kind of trying to stitch a timeline of from New York to Kansas City and how all that happened.
Um, so I was in New York for about almost 20 years, and I just kept getting downsized, downsized, downsized. And honestly, I thought, I was recruited by Hallmark to help them start one of their photo departments. And I thought, oh, try it for a year. I've kind of worked with every photographer pretty much that I wanted to in New York, and I'll be back. And I'm still here. So life happens that way. And
Yeah. So how long have you been here?
I've been here since June 97.
So what do you like the best about Kansas City? What has kept you here as far as like the scene and just Kansas City?
You know, when I think the lifestyle after living in New York for that long, um, it wasn't the people, it was the noise actually that got to me. It was just like nonstop. And, I grew up in the suburbs, so it's not like moving to Kansas City was like, this big change. It was like I kind of breathed a sigh of relief, and I was like, oh, I can smell fresh cut grass, and I can hear crickets, and there's not a subway, and so that was really nice in the beginning. And actually, when I first moved here, I was kind of I couldn't sing for almost a year. I think I was like you take a plant out of the soil and it goes through root shock. I think I went through that. I just couldn't. And that's usually what I do to, relax or help myself. But anyway, I was able to do that. And then I really, really, really wanted to sing. And I can't speak highly enough about the generosity of musicians here. And they, with some help up front with me and another friend, but put together a little jam session for me, at home. And I sang, and I'm like, oh my God, this is fun. I'm not terrified. Um, and Another musician, I didn't know how to get started. I bought a mic. Rod Fleeman told me, you need charts. And I'm like, well, what are charts? And he's like, well, you need to get the song in your key and then figure out how you want to sing it and the arrangement. I'm like, oh. So I know that sounds so simple, but like
Right.
you're trying to sing and you don't, I didn't know where to start.
Yeah, sure.
So that was really helpful. And then Danny Embry, a lot of my charts are done by hand that he did. And so I started building um, a repertoire.
Yeah.
And I I actually entered. I had a difficult year in 2004. I almost left this earth, um, and I had two different kinds of cancer. And when I kind of came to, there was this competition at Bar Natasha called Bar Natasha Idol.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember that or not, but Missy Kuntz had it, and it was just awesome. So
Yeah.
I thought, okay, I could barely walk, but I entered it. I'm like, I need to just throw myself back into it. And there's something called, let's see, there's post traumatic stress syndrome, but there's something called post traumatic growth syndrome. And I
Yeah.
think that's what I was doing. I'm like, I'm throwing myself here and
Yeah.
I'm gonna catch up. I just got to put myself out there. So I entered it and I ended up, it was pretty intense. Every week you had to have a new outfit, new songs, different genres. There were celebrity judges. It was awesome. And I ended up winning that.
Cool.
And that was such a well needed kind of um, dose of positive validation.
Yeah.
And then, the prize was Missy would coach you. God, I love that woman. And then you had your own cabaret show.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned that that's where I learned that to read energy in a room, because during the competition, friends were coming in with flags, Cynthia, and it was packed, and you could feel the energy. It was palpable. So for my cabaret show that I did, and people came, I came out on stage and I almost fell on my face because I was used to this pillow of intense energy.
Yeah.
And I'm in the middle of singing, going, oh my gosh, I didn't know what energy was till I didn't feel it. And now I've got to project that.
Yeah.
And it was terrifying but a great learning experience. And to this day, I don't put a set list together. I read the energy in the room, even if we're wallpaper, and just kind of decide what's going to work.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. So after all these years of doing this, what do you like the best about being a professional musician?
I love harmonizing. I have I've been with mostly the same group of musicians for I'm gonna have to look at my taxes. I think 12 years maybe, but we do four-part harmonies. And even in high school, I was in madrigal, and I just love harmony. And so the band members are John Miles. He plays a upright bass, and it's over 200 years old. Rick Moreski, who I think you've interviewed on his original work,
Yeah.
and he made both his guitars with his father.
Wow.
Yeah, and you can tell there's like musicians like going like this, and at break they're like, "Where'd you get that guitar?"
Yeah.
They're
Uh-huh.
trying to figure it out. And then Byron Jones has joined us kind of recently with trumpet and flugelhorn, but I have jazz violin or other musicians, and my band has been incredibly supportive and helpful because I'm not musically trained and they all are. So, I make my own arrangements, but then they've got to write them out for me.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Sure. So why do you love jazz?
Well, I love all music.
Right. Yeah, no, I know that.
And I think the part of jazz that resonates, well, I shouldn't say the most, but originally resonated with me is the Great American Songbook and the stories that were told and the beauty in some of the compositions like Cole Porter and Yip Harburg and like some, Irving Berlin, some of those composers, wow. So the stories they told, how it fell together with the music, and um, and even less kind of standard jazz where the notes go unexpectedly. I just love. Um, I also love sharing it. And
Sure.
as I said earlier, when we play at the Savoy, we're in vintage uh, outfits. They're not costumes, but we're part of that era. And I want to transport people,
Yeah.
and because there's a lot to be said in those songs.
So what do you like the best about Kansas City?
What do I like the most?
The best about Kansas City, yeah.
Hmm. Well, I have to say, um, I don't know if every block is like this, but the sense of community that I, for instance, my block that I live on, they had a book club for a while, but we're all friends
Yeah.
on this block. That's so unusual. My every time I talk to my friends, they're like, "You're in Mayberry RFD." I'm like, I know. But it's so special. And when I was at Hallmark, there was a community. And New York, you worked with people and you were friends, but it was so big, and people lived in so many different places. And here, not fractured but disparate, and here it's kind of like you can touch it or be part of it.
Yeah.
um this the Kansas City Euchsters, my book club, Hallmarkers, the jazz community. There's that sense of community that is very special.
Yeah. So when you look at your career, starting in Philadelphia, going to New York, coming into Kansas City, what are you the proudest of? What really stands out as a source of pride in your career?
um well, there's a couple things. My when I One of my first jobs in New York was working in the Time Life Picture Collection, and I would stay late after work to look at some of the images because they were just so gorgeous, and like the original silver prints. And they're kind of like songs. They resonate in the same way. They're capturing this time period and resonating that information to you in a beautiful way. And so I'm an archivist at heart. Um, and when I was working with another publishing company, um, I discovered that they had all these files in the basement, that yachting had closed their office. It was Times Mirror magazines. It was a bunch of outdoor and sports magazines, and I was the photo editor for it. And they moved this office, closed an office in Connecticut, and they moved all the files to the sub basement of this giant building on Park Avenue. And kind of incidentally, I discovered that it was all down there. So they had original negatives, from glass negatives from Beacon and Cowes. They had Roosevelt manuscripts. They had New York City Yacht Club, like all their books from all the years. And I was like, oh my God. And so when I tried very hard to get them to, you know, donate it and get it somewhere. And because I wasn't like a yachtsman, um, they were like, yeah, 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 that was in Coscop. We don't care about that. Or they didn't say that, but it wasn't top priority for them. So when I was downsized, I said to the president of Times Mirror, I said, please give me 2 weeks to like get into that basement and see if I can donate it to someone, because they were gonna toss it.
Wow.
Um, and that I I I just couldn't abide that.
Yeah.
And so they allowed me to go through it, and I was able to donate it, and it's still kind of in a weird um, uh, status at oh, I'm gonna not remember the name of the Mystic Seaport Museum, because when you donate something, there's photography, there's manuscripts,
Yeah.
there's glass negatives, there's books, so it all goes to different areas. And I keep calling them and saying, how's that going? So I was really happy about that.
Yeah.
um
So let me ask you this. Everyone
yeah.
out there has a perception of you. Family, friends, fans, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
uh Musically, personally,
I
like,
think the Venn diagram kind of goes into itself. It's just kind of the general perception of the people have of you, but you run the show. You're the one in charge.
mhm. um hmm, gosh, I guess I would say, you have to think about that. um uh Positive for the most part. Probably generous to a fault. uh Hopefully kind. um Curious, always curious, love learning. uh Inclusive. um mm, I'm sure there's other adjectives I'm not thinking
Yeah,
of.
no, that's a good list. That's a really good list. So let's get into the good business here. Your latest album in 2019 was Lost Verses, and you I saw you at the Savoy. So if anyone wants to pick up your album, if anyone wants to catch you live, anything else that's going on, where can they go? How can they find out what's going on?
So we're at the Savoy every second Saturday of the month.
Okay.
And through the end of 2024, we're at Market at Meadowbrook the last Saturday of the month.
Yeah.
And I try to get the gig so it's easy for people to remember. And when the, what was your other question? When,
Your CD, where can people pick it up? And
it's online. It's like on Amazon or
okay.
Apple Music, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, CD Babies kind of bit the dust.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I did the, it's so funny because when I finished it, of course, that was right when the pandemic started.
Yeah.
And my largest sale was to a gentleman, and I haven't heard from him, so I'm kind of worried, but he wanted hundreds of CDs and paid me in advance. And this was Japan. And he's the largest jazz distributor in Japan. And then he was talking about bringing me over there.
Wow.
And because I guess they love, this type of music and
Yeah.
of the aura and the glamour of old, which I love. And so, I got all of those to him, and then I haven't heard from him. So I don't know what happened with that. Um, but, CDs are, most people have a CD player in their car.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you could get into a time machine and go back into the history of Kansas City and see one show on 18 and Vine, wherever you want to go, what would you love to have seen live in Kansas City in the heyday?
Mm. Julia Lee,
Yeah.
uh, Charlie Parker. Uh, those are the first two that
Yeah.
come to mind.
Yeah.
Uh, any of the speakeasies, like,
Yeah.
because it was just such a cool place during that time period.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
Cynthia, this has been great. Thank you so much for opening up. Thank you for your time. Keep doing the great music, and I look forward to seeing you out there live. I'm sure I'll run into you again. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and thank you for supporting musicians and bringing their stories out to other people because I think that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely.